My jealous stepsister stole my life by sleeping with my husband, and now she's marrying him. I never thought my life would turn into one of those dramatic stories you see on TV, the kind where betrayal strikes from within your own family, and the person you trusted most turns out to be the villain. But here I am, sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at the wedding invitation in my hands, my stomach churning with a mix of disbelief and anger. My stepsister, Claire, is marrying my husband. My ex-husband, I should say. How did it come to this? How did my world fall apart so completely, so utterly, that now I'm holding an invitation to the wedding of the two people who have hurt me the most? I keep replaying it over and over in my head, trying to pinpoint the exact moment everything went wrong, trying to understand how I ended up here, alone, while they're planning a future together. Claire came into my life when I was 13. My dad had just remarried after my mom passed away, and Claire was the daughter from his new wife, Marianne. She was a year younger than me but acted like she was older, always trying to outshine me, always competing. At first, I thought it was just normal sibling rivalry. I tried to be patient, to be the bigger person, but Claire made it difficult. She had this way of turning every situation to her advantage, of making herself the center of attention. And my dad, maybe out of guilt or a desire to make his new wife happy, always seemed to take her side. But I never imagined she'd go this far. I never imagined she'd betray me like this. It started subtly, as most betrayals do. Claire and I were never particularly close, but we maintained a civil relationship for the sake of our parents. She was charming, in a superficial way, always putting on a show for others. My husband, Mark, was no exception. I noticed the way she flirted with him at family gatherings, the way she laughed a little too loudly at his jokes, touched his arm a little too often. But I never thought much of it. I trusted him. I trusted them both. Mark and I had been married for 6 years. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and built a life together. We were happy, or so I thought. Looking back now, I can see the cracks that were forming, the little things I ignored, the signs I should have paid more attention to. But I was busy with work, with trying to start a family, with life. I didn't see what was happening right under my nose. Then, one day, everything changed. I came home early from work, excited to surprise Mark with tickets to a show he'd been wanting to see. I'll never forget the moment I opened the door to our bedroom and saw them, Mark and Claire, tangled together in our bed. Our bed. My breath caught in my throat, my vision blurred, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. What the hell is going on? I screamed, my voice trembling with a mixture of shock and rage. Mark scrambled out of the bed, trying to cover himself, his face pale with guilt. Claire, on the other hand, didn't seem the least bit embarrassed. She just sat there, watching me with a smug smile on her face, like she'd won some sort of twisted game. It's not what it looks like, Mark stammered, his eyes wide with panic. Oh, really? I shot back, my voice rising. Because it looks like you're sleeping with my sister. My stepsister. In our bed. Claire finally spoke then, her voice calm, almost amused. Half-sister, she corrected, as if that made any difference, as if that lessened the betrayal. And, honestly, Emma, you should have seen this coming. Mark and I, we have something special. Something you clearly couldn't give him. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make them both feel the pain I was feeling. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My whole world was crashing down around me, and I didn't know how to stop it. Get out, I finally managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. Both of you, get out of my house. Mark tried to apologize, tried to explain, but I couldn't listen. I couldn't bear the sound of his voice, the sight of his face. I turned away, tears streaming down my cheeks, my heart shattering into a million pieces. They left that day, and I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I could pick up the pieces, move on, rebuild my life. But Claire wasn't done with me yet. She moved in with Mark almost immediately. I heard from mutual friends, saw the photos on social media. At first, I tried to ignore it, tried to block it out, but it was everywhere. Claire and Mark, playing house, acting like nothing had happened, like they hadn't destroyed my life. And then, a few months later, the invitation arrived. I stared at it for hours, unable to process what I was seeing. A wedding. They were getting married. Claire and Mark, my stepsister and my husband. It was like a cruel joke, a twisted nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I tore the invitation in half, then in quarters, then into tiny pieces, each rip a release of anger, of pain, of betrayal. But it didn't help. It didn't make the hurt go away. I sat down on the floor, surrounded by the torn remains of the invitation, and cried. I cried for everything I'd lost, for the future I'd never have, for the life that had been stolen from me. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a deep depression. I barely ate, barely slept. I couldn't escape the thoughts, the images, the memories. I replayed that moment in my head over and over again, trying to understand, trying to make sense of it. But there was no sense to be made. Claire had always been jealous of me, always wanted what I had. And now, she'd taken the one thing she couldn't stand for me to have, Mark. I don't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the realization that I had been so blind, so naive. I had trusted them both, loved them both, and they had both betrayed me in the worst possible way. I started seeing a therapist, trying to find a way to cope, to move forward. It helped, a little. She told me I needed to let go of the anger, to stop blaming myself, to start focusing on my own healing. But it was easier said than done. Every time I thought I was making progress, something would happen to drag me back down. A photo of them on social media, a mutual friend mentioning their names, a wedding invitation I'd somehow missed in the pile of mail I'd been avoiding. The wedding day came and went. I stayed in bed, pulled the covers over my head, and pretended the world didn't exist. I didn't want to think about them, didn't want to imagine them saying their vows, starting their life together. But I couldn't escape it. The images played in my mind, unbidden, like a movie I couldn't turn off. It's been 6 months now since that day, and I'm still trying to find my footing, still trying to figure out what comes next. I've started dating again, trying to put myself out there, trying to rebuild my life. But it's hard. Every time I start to feel happy, to feel hopeful, the memories come flooding back, and I'm right back where I started. I ran into Claire at the grocery store last week. She was with Mark, of course, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She saw me before I could duck out of sight, and I watched as a smile spread across her face, a smile that sent a shiver down my spine. Well, if it isn't the blushing bride, she said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. How's single life treating you, Emma? I wanted to scream, to slap her, to make her feel the pain she'd caused. But I didn't. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Better than married life with a cheating husband, I shot back, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Good. Let him feel the guilt. Let him live with the consequences of his actions. Claire just laughed, a cold, hollow laugh that cut through me like a knife. Oh, Emma, she said, shaking her head, still so bitter. Maybe if you weren't so uptight, you'd still have a husband. I walked away then, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. I couldn't listen to her anymore, couldn't stand the sight of them together. I left my cart in the aisle and walked out of the store, my eyes burning with unshed tears. I'm still angry, still hurt, still trying to figure out how to move on, how to rebuild my life. But I'm starting to realize that maybe it's not about forgetting what happened, but about finding a way to live with it. To accept that I can't change the past, but I can control my future. I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing, I'm stronger than they think. I'm stronger than I ever knew. And no matter what, I won't let them break me. I will find my way. I will be okay. And one day, I'll look back on this and realize that it was just a chapter in my story, not the whole book.